Hey, Bellator Society. Good morning. Welcome to our live stream. I'm your host, Tracy Eddy, and my other host, my co-host, Fran Yeager, can't be with us this morning, but we have a really fun guest, and I'm so excited to introduce her. Her name is Emily Pridgen, and she's joining us from South Carolina. She's on one side of the country, and I'm on the other side of the country, but she and Fran connected through social media, which is really, I think, awesome. It's kind of part of our ministry is bringing some goodness to some of the darker corners of the internet, and they struck up a friendship. And the more Fran got to know Emily, she thought, well, gosh, she'd be a great guest. And then it turns out we have a lot in common. So I'm so excited to have you all to myself today. Good morning, Emily.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm really excited to be here. This is so fun. I know when getting to know Fran was so fun. And then when she told me some things about you, I was like, this is going to be awesome. It's going to be a great chat. So
yes,
thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So Emily is a convert to the faith, and she just shared with me that she just came into the church at Pentecost. So normally our converts, people who are joining the church, come in at the Easter Vigil, but with all the craziness of COVID, it's sort of been fun to watch people, different parish dioceses, I think, have had a little different timelines. So you came in during Pentecost. Can you tell us a little bit? I'm curious about your faith journey into Catholicism and kind of what made you want to become Catholic?
Sure. Well, I've been involved in church life since I was little. I was raised in a Baptist church. My parents, brought me to church every week, and I had like this time as a young person, about a 10-year window where I kind of walked away from all of it,
Right.
And then in my early 20s, when I had a baby, someone invited me to a Bible study, and I just fell in love with Jesus and never looked back, So
That's
I've been kind of like, walking with Christ for a while in that sense. My grandmother is actually Catholic. And so as growing up, and different times she would take me to mass, and I've been with her on several occasions in recent years. And I just really enjoyed it. I loved just so beautiful. And so just, I don't know, there's something really tender about it. I just really felt drawn to that experience with her. And so a couple years ago, our family kind of had some difficult seasons, I guess, as we, kind of worked through some things. And during that time, my faith was really kind of, I won't say it was rocky, but I just was thinking about things in a deeper way,
Right.
And I just was kind of exploring like different avenues. And when we moved here, we're in South Carolina a year ago, it was, I was thinking like, okay, I really need to find a church, and I wasn't quite sure where to go. And we tried several that were, wonderful churches, Protestant churches. And, it was great, but I just couldn't seem to feel at home. I just couldn't seem to feel at rest. And so one day I thought, I noticed the Catholic church in town. It's a beautiful campus. And I was like, I'm just going to look at the website and just see like what they have going on. I'm going to explore. And so I reached out to this woman, my friend Deb, and she was kind of running the RCIA program, which I literally had no clue what that was. Somehow I found her email, reached out. She said, hey, do you want to have coffee? And so we did. And that really started a whole process for me. She was a convert as well. And so hearing her experience, and she invited me to RCIA. And the more I went, I felt like I was falling in love with Jesus all over again. It was just so beautiful. The parish was so welcoming. It was so just, I would come in and people would know who I was and inviting me, and they had good food, of course, that was nice. But the main thing was that when our local priest, Father Andrew, every time he would do a lesson, he explained things so clearly, and I had a lot of misconceptions, as most Protestants do, about what Catholic teaching was, what it wasn't, and so I had a lot of questions, and he just answered with such grace. And the more I learned, the more I was like, I really feel like God is calling me to become Catholic. It was really scary because, I've been a Protestant my whole life before this. And it was kind of a scary step to take, but I got to the point where I literally couldn't do anything else. You know what I mean? I was
Right.
like, I can't deny what I've discovered. I can't like walk away from this. I know this is God's call and I'm just going to follow it. And so I jumped in and it's been just awesome. I love it. And it's so fun because my grandma is like so excited now too.
That's
So we
right. She's
sing
got a
that.
buddy. So
Yes.
I want to back up just a little bit. RCIA, for those who are watching who maybe don't know, is stands for the Rite of Christian Initiation for Adults.
Mhm.
My daughter, and we're going to talk about adoption in a little bit, but when we adopted our children, 2 of them had been baptized, Russian Orthodox. Our youngest had not been baptized. So she came through RCIC, which is
Mhm.
Rite of Christian Initiation for Children. And that's a whole, something I didn't really even know existed in the church, because I always just thought, you hear RCIA and adults come into the church.
Right.
I never really thought about the kids.
Right.
So that's a whole different program, but it's goes along with the adult program, of course. Okay. So did your whole family become Catholic, or was it just mama?
Well, for right now, it's just me. I have 5 kids and my husband, and everyone's like really supportive. And I've got some little ones that are coming along with me,
Mm-hmm.
and a couple of my older kids are interested, but I'm not going to force them to do anything. I mean, they're like 16, 18,
Yeah.
and 19. So it's just, I respect their, you know,
So, I love that you say that, because, the Lord never pushes himself on people. And so
that's true.
that's why we have free will. And, for your young adult children, I assume, I expect, or my prayer would be that seeing your joy and your love
Mhm.
and your maybe peace and contentment maybe inspires them to
Yeah.
look into it themselves. Because sometimes just being a Christian example or a Catholic example is enough to make somebody watching from the outside think,
Hmm.
what does she
Yeah.
have? I mean, I want what she's got.
Right.
I think a joyful Christian is the best evangelism
I
probably that we can have. Okay. So your family's
know.
supportive. That's awesome.
Yes.
But you came in at Pentecost. How was that?
Um,
I'm assuming you go through the whole program and you're like,
mhm.
all right,
All
Easter
right,
Vigil,
ready.
come on. And then
Yeah.
like right before.
It was great. I mean, it was a little bit of a waiting time, but it wasn't that far after the regular. I mean, it was, listen, at that time of quarantine, everything felt like a day felt like 100 years sometimes. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it did
Especially in the
feel,
beginning.
yes, it was crazy. So, I mean, it was just a beautiful experience. I didn't mind waiting. The church, we were able to come into the church in person. We had to wear masks and all of that stuff. But it was just awesome. I loved it. I enjoyed it. And to me, I felt like it was kind of an appropriate thing. I mean, Pentecost, it's like, it's not exactly, it's a good fit for coming into the
Right.
church as well. I feel like, so
Right.
it was great. It was good.
Good. That's awesome. Okay. So, for my daughter, not funny story, but true story, and I've written about this. She had just turned 6. So
Mhm.
the age of reason in our church is 6.
Mhm.
And therefore she can make up her own mind, kind of thing. And I'm
Right.
like, well, she's barely 6.
Yeah.
I'm like, come on, Monsignor. I've got
Yeah.
an uncle who's a deacon. He'll baptize her. I've got a friend who's, the chancellor
Right.
in Arkansas who will approve it if you approve it, Monsignor. I'm like, come on. And he's like, no, she can go through the program, and I was like, she doesn't speak English. Like, you're
Mhm.
going to have her sit through this program, and finally he was like, is anything wrong with her? And I'm like, well,
Right.
no. And he went, she will be fine.
Yeah.
So I really pushed it, because I'm like, she is my baby. I desire
Right.
baptism. I was really like, I know what I'm doing. And as it turns out, Monsignor was right. It was a
Aw.
beautiful experience. My sister was her sponsor, but because she didn't live in Arkansas, I went to all the kind of, retreats and classes with
Right.
her where parents or, the sponsor was supposed to be there. And it was just beautiful. And it was so special for her to come
Mhm.
in at the Easter Vigil. Like, she'll never forget it.
Right.
She, it wasn't a quick, small family thing, that she did. It was a big celebration.
Wow.
And, anyway, so sometimes listening to your sometimes we don't know everything.
Right.
And I learned through that season that obedience to the church is, really what God does call us to. So I appreciated our experience with RCIC. I was like, I'm a cradle Catholic. Why am I
Yeah.
going through this? Why are we doing this? And he said, she'll get what she can get out of it.
Right.
It will be age appropriate. And so anyways, it was. So I'm glad you had a good experience too.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, so let's move to foster adopt,
Okay.
because that was one thing Frayne was like, y'all have this in common. So I've shared many times, we adopted our children from Eastern Europe, and they're biological sisters, and they spoke Russian and Latvian, and we met them through a Christian hosting organization called New Horizons for Children.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just an awesome experience. We hosted them kind of as missionaries, that
Right.
the mission comes to you sort of thing, and just fell in love. Like, I always say that the Denver airport was my labor and delivery, because that's
Oh,
where I met my kids. And that's, immediately I knew they were mine. So,
right.
so what's your involvement with foster and adoption?
For many, many years, my husband and I have always kind of like talked about, maybe someday we'd like to adopt. Like, I'm not really sure. And then there was this point of time a few years ago when I just felt certain that we were supposed to do this, and I didn't really know exactly what that was going to look like, but it was a real moment. And I just knew, I thought this is going to happen. I just know it. So I talked to my husband about it. He was kind of like, I don't know if we're really like in a good place for that. And I tried the whole pathway that many women do of like leave the brochure in the bathroom, or like, little pictures in the car, little things around. I tried to kind of convince him, and it just wasn't working. And so kind of with a sorrowful heart, I prayed about it, and I was like, you know what, Lord, I don't know. I thought I heard you, but maybe I didn't. And I really just kind of put it up on the shelf in my mind and my heart. I thought maybe someday, and I really left it alone for about a year. And then we were at church one Sunday, this was years ago, and it was a Protestant church, and the pastor there was a foster parent, I think, or had adopted. I can't remember where they were at that point. But he got up and shared about their story. And honestly, like, I tell you the truth, I was sitting in the back, and usually in the past, I would have thought, now's the chance, like, come on, come on, Lord, like, but I honestly was thinking like, oh, that's so awesome for them. Like, that's just so cool. And it's really sweet. Well, then when we got home that afternoon, my husband was like, look, I don't know what to tell you, but like, I think we're supposed to do this. And so it was just really neat, because God really stirred his heart, and he's the one that kind of led the way with that. And so we started the process of getting licensed to foster. And that's kind of where it began.
So what I'm hearing from you is you are a master at really listening to the Lord, because every story you have is like, I really felt God calling me to do this. And,
Well,
and in the kind of adventure he took you on, like coming into the church, even though you came as by yourself with the support of your family, you're following the lead, you're following the path that you hear, the Lord laying out before you. And the same thing with this, but also you were so wise to, like you said, table it, because sometimes our timing is really not the best.
yeah,
Learn. I think that's really a skill of discernment, to learn to hear God's voice and to know, just because I want this right now and it's a
right.
good thing, it's not a bad thing, doesn't mean it's the right thing at the right moment, and so being able to just be so prudent, because I'm probably less like you in that way. I'm like, no, we're gonna do this.
Don't be too impressed, because I think the reason why I got to that point was because I spent so many years like thinking I could like sway the situation. There was a lot of, and you carry a lot of pain with that when you keep trying to like manipulate situations and it doesn't work out, and you're like, but this is such a good thing. So it really came from more of like failing in a certain way or whatever. But honestly, I think a lot of women really need to hear that too, because I think it's easier sometimes for women to feel the call, you know what I mean? And I hear this from a lot of people, that husbands are a little bit slower to come around sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes. And so really, we really can trust God, and we really can like know that he did put that desire in our hearts for a reason. And even if like, let's say that didn't happen with Andy and we didn't, it's still this like love that God puts in your heart for the world, that you can do other things. I mean, that's something I really like to, encourage people too, is that if for some reason you don't do foster care, adoption, or whatever, and you have a passion for it, man, there are so many ways that you can get involved and be a
Right.
part of that in the world.
Right. Right. So tell me about the foster. So is this in South Carolina you did this, or was this
Yes,
before you moved? Okay. So
that's
tell
right.
me about the foster. Is it a foster to adopt program or just foster? Because I live in Arizona now, and I have not gotten it as involved in the foster care here, mainly because I've got 3 of my own, that were,
Right.
there's just a lot of adjustment.
True.
But in Arkansas, pre-children, I was very involved, really from a back seat. I was very interested. We hadn't started a family yet. So I started following these different groups and organizations and really, praying for them and donating
Right.
and, just supporting them how I could. So tell me about the program in South Carolina. Is it just a state program, or is it like in Arkansas, it's like a nonprofit that it's kind of a public-private type partnership where
Right.
they work with churches and they really do wonderful work for kids in foster care. It's like, I just can't say enough good things, but I'm curious because, it seems like it's something that if we could duplicate and put it in
Right.
every state, just the impact it would make, I think would be amazing.
Yeah. Well, in South Carolina, there's lots of different ways you can go about it. I mean, if you just want to like jump into adoption, there's private adoption. You can do that through, they have, there are church ministries and different things that you can do that. And so that's always an option. And if you go through the state, they do have a foster to adopt. Okay. So you can go that route, like, sure. And so that's one option. Or what we did was just got involved with foster care, because honestly, and this is the truth, like when we started fostering, we really did not have in our radar that we were going to end up adopting. Like, I know that I said that was kind of always a desire, and it was, but when we jumped in, it was kind of like, you know what, there's a big need and we can help. And so we got involved with just foster care, which really changed our life. I mean, so we spent 3 years just about in the system. And we had, I have 4 biological children. I have 1 adopted son. And through the 3 years, we had about 6, we were family with 6 kids, mostly through that time, so we've had, and so we just like jumped in. You have to learn the system. It can be kind of intimidating, honestly, because especially if you don't know how it works, and you get in there and like, there are people who are really, like, the system is broken for sure. And I think that's across the board in every state.
Yes.
So South Carolina is really working on some things. It's improving, and our state director is just amazing. Michael Leach, he's like doing so many awesome things for the state. But so you're in the system, you're going to court, you're meeting all kinds of people, and there are some wonderful, beautiful people in the system, caseworkers, court judges, even attorneys. I mean, there are just some people that are wonderful. There are other people that are more difficult. Okay. And I will say there is the rare occasion where you really do feel like you're up against, I don't want to overstate it, but like, it feels like you're up against something evil working against either the child or this family, this birth family. I mean, you really run into, because it is a spiritual battle as well.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of scary to jump in, but you learn as you go, and it's transformative. I mean, one of the things that I really noticed right away when we got involved was that these children were coming to us. We, always are like first and foremost for reunification with families. I mean, that is just like the key thing that's so important. And the families are dealing with their own trauma, which leads them to this place. The kids have trauma, for one thing, from whatever the family's going through as a whole, but also just from being taken from their family. I mean, that is so traumatizing. And so you really start to see like, there are hurting people all around us. And I really didn't know how extensive it was in the community until I started fostering and realizing like there's so much pain and hurt around. And once you get in, you see it. It's everywhere. And so
you see it, and then you also see, or at least in our case, because we did a lot of all the trauma training and things like
right.
that. Which at first, funny story, my husband and I are like, oh, this is so hokey, like okay,
Oh,
and then we were home with our girls in the beginning, and we're like, this isn't hokey. This
yeah.
is not,
No, it's so
this
true.
training is good training. Like we were annoyed that we were having to do the training because it's long and it's extensive, but as always, we were humbled and learned that, the training is good and it's there for a reason. But my husband has said many times it opened his eyes up to the prison system and criminal justice reform.
Oh, it's so
and,
true.
And, if you look at the majority of the people in jail, many of them are from broken families. Many of them have trauma from their family situation or maybe growing up in some sort of, just broken system. And so it changes your heart really for justice, in a way. So is that what you found too?
It is. And I really think that like the amazing part about it is you it really binds us together as humans. I mean, in the community, because you enter into other people's trauma, you kind of take it on, and you have to learn how to navigate that because you can get burned out and stuff too. Just if you don't learn how to do self-care, which, just a side note, that's a wonderful way that people who can't foster and adopt can minister to families who are, because burnout is really, something that you have to, anyway. So just
meals, gift cards,
and
support.
Just accepting the kids and just loving on the kids and just being there. Just anyway, there's so many things. But entering into that trauma, it kind of makes you realize, like, man, we are all experiencing our own trauma in this world. Some is going to come with bigger consequences. Some is, harder. But it really did change us as people. One of the neat things that kind of birthed out of this was I have tons of awesome adoptive and foster mom friends who are like probably far better the person to talk to than I am. They're like
whatever
doing amazing things. But one of the things that we started noticing is, like you were talking about, the trauma training that you received. A lot of parents don't, even foster parents, caregivers, teachers, even people in the community, like they don't really know a lot of that. And so we ended up actually starting a nonprofit. It's called Flourishing Families of South Carolina.
Okay.
And people can find it on Facebook. You can look at our website. But we actually help equip families and caregivers learn these ways to parent or care for kids who have experienced childhood trauma. And it's really amazing how the brain truly can heal.
Yep.
And some of these things do feel hokey. Like
it does. You're like, this is silly. And then we're like, this is genius.
I know. One of the things I just remember hearing, and I was like, are you serious? Because one of the things is, if you can feed your child, like that's an attachment. And I'm like, well, okay, for my little guy, maybe, but I am not trying to feed my teenager.
Ones.
But they were like,
the older ones. Yeah.
I learned there's a way to do it that's not weird. But it's all of that learning attachment and helping these kids heal. And, our real hope is that we can even help birth families, like before they get to that point, to, just, I don't know, stay connected.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think if more people had this, we would discipline differently. We would, our education systems would be different. Our prisons would be different. Our juvenile, delinquent programs would be different. And we would, I think you have to come from a perspective of this behavior is not because they're a bad kid. This behavior is telling you something. So and if you don't know what this behavior is showing, then you think they're just unruly, undisciplined. They need, whatever, a big kick in the rear, but that's just not the case. That's not, that's not how you parent or care for kids who've been through trauma. So I love that. So we'll put your website. We will link it to our show notes, because I love that. That's awesome. I didn't know you were doing that.
Yeah. Well, and especially now we're doing a lot of virtual trainings and stuff too that people can sign up for. And so it makes it even easier. It is a South Carolina or a nonprofit, but we're really able to branch out a lot more now. So it is life-changing to learn some of these things, as you know.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. So the other thing that I'm told we have in common is that we both we're both college students. I mean,
Yes.
so I have a funny story about my college experience. And then I want to hear all about yours. But mine, when I first told my husband, since probably 2012, I've said like, God, I wish I would have done something different in college. Like, I wish I would
Right.
have become a nurse or like considered pre-med or something. But I was scared of science, and I was 18 and scared of science, like many 18-year-olds, and just,
Right.
I'm just not going to do that. And pretty much every major I looked at, if it had like too much science, I was like, oh, that's not for
That's
me.
out.
Yep. I mean, I literally, and so I ended up being an advertising major, which nothing wrong with that, but it's just really not my passion at all.
Right.
And I'm glad for the skills that I have, and it's basically a journalism degree, which has come in handy with a blog and things like that. But I've always kind of thought, what if? So I went back last year and started taking some like biology and all the sciences that I didn't have to, maybe consider in the future applying to nursing school. Having said that, I'm just going to our community college. They've got great, some great, a great program. They have a great nursing program there, and they marry up with another university here that does like a post-baccalaureate program where you can get a master's. So anyways, the first day of school, the day before my first day, I told my husband, I'm a little nervous. I haven't, been to school in forever. And I said, would you take me? Can we just go and like find my classes and stuff? And he's like, sure. So we go, and, and we're laughing about it now, but we get there, and he's looking on my schedule, and we're finding where my classes are. And he looked and he said, who's your professor? And I said, and it's a woman, Dr. Patty. And he said, what if you walk in and people think you're Dr. Patty?
Oh my gosh.
That is so rude. He was like, well, I mean, you could be the professor. So that was our joke. He was like, did anybody like turn in their homework to you today? And I'm like, no.
Oh my gosh.
But tell me about yours.
Well, I think I mentioned earlier, I had that season in life that was a little rocky from, about a 10-year window. My college experience was kind of wrapped up in the end of that. So when I went to college in the late 90s, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I was kind of leaning towards education, but I couldn't really get my GPA in the right place. Anyway, I never finished. I'll just leave it at that. So it's not my shining moment, but it all works out. I mean, but since then though, because I never finished, it's always just been like something I wanted to do, So a few years ago when we got involved with foster care again, and we were kind of in the system and I started learning more, I was like, I really want to be a part of positive change. Like, I really want to take it to that next level. So I started on a social work degree, and my initial goal was like, I want to get a social work degree. I want to get for my MSW, I'm like going to go all the way. And I still I love social work. I loved everything. I took a few classes, and I will say, just as encouragement to people who might be 40 or 40 something or whatever, I did take a few classes, then I had to put it down. Then I took a few more classes, then I had to put it down. And now I think I'm kind of in the long stretch, but sometimes, it's okay to do that. I mean, you have to just kind of work with your life and where you are. But since then, I have really found that I am really passionate about racial justice. I'm really passionate about just reframing even some of our, national, not reframing our national history, like rewriting it, but I mean, we're missing a lot about our history with the African American experience and things like that. And one of my children is biracial, white and African American. So as a family, we've been kind of learning about culture and different things. So recently I made the change and I switched to African and African American studies as my major. And I've got a minor in history, and, I love it. Like, I just got off my African American studies class yesterday, and I was able to join into a live class on Zoom. And I was in the car after that, and I was praying. I'm like, God, I want to live in that world forever. Like, I love everything I just learned. I loved being challenged. I love listening to the students. I love the teacher, everything. And so I switched.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah, I mean, I really just feel like I want to teach or write or maybe work with a nonprofit, but this particular major has a lot more of all of those things woven in. It's social
Right.
science, but it's also history and English, and it's a really neat
Perfect.
program.
It's like
So,
it's tailor-made for you.
oh my gosh, it is. I'm like, I was so
But you know
excited when I signed up.
what a gift that is, because how many people can wake up so excited to either go to school or take a class or go to
I
work?
know.
I think that um, that going back to school, our age and our season of
Yes,
life, you appreciate it more.
so
In
true.
my case, I'm paying for it. My husband
Yes,
and I are paying for it, which was not the case when I was 18.
right.
Um, so I want, you have to really want it. You have to be excited to go. And I'm just like you. When Corona hit, I was like, I can't do summer online
Right.
microbiology. Like my brain, I need to sit in a desk and like
Right.
make eye contact with the teacher. Maybe I'm showing my age in that way that that's the kind of learner I know I am. And so I took the summer off and I'm taking the fall off too. Cause again, I just, I want to learn it. I don't want to just
Right.
check the box and,
Yes.
finish the class or anything. So I'm glad you just encouraged me by saying you can put it down and pick it back up. And
You really
I'm
can.
following your lead there.
Yeah, I mean, just, it felt like a failure at the time. I was like, dang
Yeah.
it, I just can't. But sometimes we just have to really recognize what we can do, what we can't. We only have so much emotional energy, to give. And it's okay.
Right. Exactly. Well,
Well,
this
that's
has been
exciting for
such a
you.
treat to talk to you. I'm so glad that I got to meet you. And I do want to tell our listeners that if you enjoyed listening to Emily today, which I can't imagine anyone not enjoying listening to you, you're going to be on our podcast, and we're going to talk
Yes.
about some other things that I think would be of great interest. We're going to talk about some Catholic subculture, which the Catholic Church is a huge faith community. We're
Mm-hmm.
global. We've got, over 1 billion people consider themselves Catholic. And so naturally there are subcultures within our church. And so we're going to talk about that on the podcast. And we're also going to be making some announcements from Bellator Society. And so I hope that y'all join us on Friday and listen to the podcast. And Emily, thanks for joining us live. And thank you for
Yeah.
sticking around for the podcast.
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed this so much. It's been great talking with you.
Awesome. All right, y'all. We're gonna sign off for today, and we'll talk to you later.
All right. Bye.
Bye.